Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, May 15th, 2023, and we're back. Hey, how you doing? We're a little late in getting everything up and started, but we made it just in time. Thank you to the Apple computer folks who made the thing that made it so that we could turn it on at short notice, and it would start thinking just in time, and we'd be able to get the broadcast rolling. It was like 8:58, and I was like, hey, my computers aren't started. Why did I do anything else? But, you know, a wacky and confusing day. Everybody's disoriented. It's just the way it is. And, oh, yes, right. Well, graduation weekend, of course. So graduation is accomplished. We've done that. And all the awards and accoutrements, I guess, and the regalia came out. Everybody decorated themselves up like Christmas trees. And College Boy was well decorated himself. Some Latin honors bestowed. And all sorts of things. Ribbons and medallions and pins and stoles and cords and all that. And it was very nice. And we had a great time. And now it's sort of jumping back to, okay, well, now back to your normal life, plus an additional person back in the house, which is terrific, but also piled all over the place are things that were in the apartment for 2 years and now are back in the house and might go back out the door, some of it, most of it, I hope, with high school kid who's on his way to college next year, but right now on his way to school. Didn't have to try to make the bus today, so that was good. But that also set things back. He was supposed to go in, I think he's getting a ride directly to school today from production staff. As you know, we keep everybody anonymous here, so that they can speak about subjects about which they don't have clearance or something like that. Anyway, on his way and out the door and handing in a couple of assignments this morning that are maybe all that stands in the way of him, between him and freedom at the end of high school. And anyway, just sort of rearranging the house to accommodate these things that are going to be here for at least a little while before they get packed up again and sent back out. But, you know, good cleaning and refurbishing and then back out the door. I didn't have a chance to test the Skype today before airtime, which is something that I usually do. I mean, you want to do that now? Or we just cross our fingers and hope it works? I think it'll be fine when Greg calls. Usually I do a Skype test call in the morning before airtime just to make sure everything is okay. And when and everything is fine 99% of the time. The times that we don't do the test call are the times that we run into problems, of course. So we'll wait and see whether that happens. Not much time for me to monitor the news over the weekend either. We were living on Planet Graduation and moving from event to event. And so I don't know. So I'll call on our good friend Greg Dworkin, who's been following the news and whose kids have already graduated and he's been through this thing, so he knows. And I guess he also knows about the brain fog that ensues. Plenty to go over. It appears that many people didn't know that it was graduation weekend for us and for most people, apparently. I think for a lot of colleges and universities, it's perhaps next weekend as well. This particular university tends to do things about a week ahead of its nearby peers, which is great. Perfect for hotel accommodations. Didn't make any difference in restaurant accommodations, by the way, just in case you were wondering. And, all right. Well, gosh, there's a lot going on and, no one knows what it is. Hope you enjoyed the 1 hour special we were able to squeak out on Thursday and, enjoyed the trip down memory lane on Friday during our encore presentation, our instant replay, if you will. All right. So let's see what's on the, agenda for today. Well, as it turns out, they haven't solved the whole debt ceiling thing yet, so I thought they were going to. just to make it fun for me and Joan when we speak tomorrow and say, hey, what do you know? They wrapped it all up after all, and everything's fine. But I guess not. So that's too bad, and we'll have to deal with that. And let's see, skimming over a few other items that I see. Oh, Greg has everything all lined up, of course. DeSantis, much in the news as well, doing his fascistic sort of thing. And, I don't know. All right. Well, we'll see what other fun things there are to go over. And I can always, of course, fall back on Pocket. And I have what looks to be a semi-long read here, but I have to kind of decide whether or not how to approach this thing. This is a very interesting CBS News article that looks to be a bit of a long read. I'm a little worried about where this might be going. Mormon who left Wall Street to work for charity blows the whistle on what he says is his church's clandestine hedge fund. And they've occupied an interesting and brilliant space here with what they've been doing, which is to say that the space, in addition to operating as a church and having the protection from taxation, they also put themselves in the delicate spot of, this might be something that needs to be called out and might not be entirely what we want to use the tax code for, to say the least. But at the same time, it's also a major religion, and you're going to be dealing with some touchy subjects here, and it's difficult to know how to appropriately point out wrongdoing without religious persecution, or at least claims of religious persecution following closely thereafter. So it's going to be touchy. Maybe we can see at some point soon how CBS has decided to approach it and see whether we think it is safe territory to follow them along with. All right, Greg Dworkin is here, and he's got news, and he's going to tell us what it is. And that's how the show goes. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. So it was a relatively slow news weekend.
Yeah.
You know, in the sense that, like, Trump wasn't indicted for anything yet.
All right. I only watched weather.
Yeah.
You know?
There was the theme, I guess, if there is one, for the pundit roundup today was the inability of the Republicans to press forward and their frustration and their floundering, frankly.
Oh, no.
On the topics that they're trying to make salient. I mean, clearly abortion and Dobbs-Roe landscape are big deals and continue to be big deals for Democrats.
That's become salient.
Interestingly, not so much in the Latino community, which is important for Florida and for Texas, which we'll get to in a minute when we take a quick look at religion from a different angle than the one you were talking about. Mm-hmm. But what I wrote this morning on Twitter is that Republicans are floundering trying to settle on an issue that revs up their base like Roe Dobbs does for Democrats. The Title 42 reversals a bust so far. All the networks, I was watching NBC News. I'm old, so at dinner I watched Lester Holt. They had their cameras on the borders for like a week saying, oh my gosh, when this happens, people are going to be like zombie, like pouring over the wall. They're going to be climbing and dropping and the numbers to no end. And they showed pictures of crowded roads. And then finally they had their asylum experts and immigration experts on the shows saying, hey, you know, the traffic you're seeing is like normal traffic. This is like really busy because these are busy legal crossings. People go to Juarez, Mexico all the time.
Yeah. From
El Paso. I mean, that's like normal. And then Title 42 happened, and all of a sudden the numbers started to drop.
Oh.
And they weren't ready for that.
Okay.
They were ready for, it's going to, and now they don't know what to do.
Oh.
So the issue is a serious one, don't get me wrong. But the politics are simply the politics of fear. It's the same politics as politics of caravans and politics of crime, which never does for Republicans what they think it's going to do. And then they have the Hunter Biden weaponizing committees.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we had James Comer, head of the House Oversight Committee, say, we have a big bombshell. We have insider FBI information that the laptop is a big deal. And media said to James Comer, okay, so where's your proof? Oh, well, as it turns out, I can't remember whether it was a whistleblower who told us about the informer or if the informer told us about the whistleblower, but it doesn't matter. We can't find any of them anymore. They're gone.
What?
They're missing. Oh, well, that must be a new conspiracy.
Yeah,
the missing people are due to the Biden administration. It's all their fault. And media said, wait a minute. You said there was a big deal here. We asked you for evidence and proof and corroboration, and you said it's missing. And now you're saying it's missing because of the very same people that you said were part. I'm losing the thread here. What's going on?
Well, I mean, I guess it's regular old conspiracy theory stuff, good standby stock footage, I guess, right? I have proof that so-and-so is engaged in this massive conspiracy. Where's the proof?
Now, who are you,
part
Joe
of what
McCarthy?
they're doing.
Waving around a piece of paper saying I have a list?
Yeah. Oh, part of the conspiracy is to come into my office and steal my proof the moment before I'm meant to show it to you.
Yes, they also stole my underwear.
All right, so a self-reinforcing delusion behind the conspiracy theories. Excellent.
Then we have the Republican-initiated debt ceiling crisis, which in terms of how the market is reacting, not the crash that they wanted. I mean, they're trying to cause a recession so that they can blame it on Biden, and it's not working. So I guess they never read the Ransom of Red Chief.
Right? Maybe not, right? I guess everybody's thinking, I think we could just pay for stuff in Bitcoin if the dollar collapses. So no problem.
Like that. So mind you, I wrote, all of these are serious issues at their core.
Yeah.
But none of the GOP efforts are at all based on serious analysis and solutions, not in the least. And that's what's remarkable. You know, even with a House majority, there's absolutely no serious effort to govern. It's all Marjorie Taylor Greene for show all the time, you know, Jim Jordan on steroids. And the concern, of course, is that if this kind of bomb throwing isn't getting the desired result, they'll look for newer and more powerful bombs. There's always more powerful bombs. Because the alternative to them, which is actually trying to govern, is just total anathema, let alone beyond their ability. And that's what we're learning from these so-called crises.
Well, we did know this about them, but it's nice to see some people in the news media that didn't entirely believe it and still wrote, hopeful pieces about, well, now we'll have to see whether the Republicans can govern. Well, they can't, and they never could. And
so what are you going to do about it?
You know that. I
don't know. Cameras on the borders trying to show lots of people because it's a good visual, and our GOP people tipped us off as to that's what's going on. And really, Politico and Punchbowl, the two big gossip sheets from D.C., have really descended into, we're only going to talk about what our Republican sources give us, and we're going to do it every single day. And it's really getting to be a little ridiculous.
Well, I don't know what to say.
I mean, you're not supposed to make it obvious that you're really trying to put your thumb on the scale for one side. Yeah. And that's partly because Republicans want to source this stuff. They're trying to leak this stuff.
Yes.
And Democrats are just trying to go about the business of governance. Now, you might think that that's a good thing, but in terms of politics, it's a stupid thing. Democrats need to play the game better.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, the Republicans...
Barney Frank was good at it. He could do both.
True. The Republicans have a game plan for what to do if there isn't anything organically happening in the news. They make stuff up and say, look at this. Let's have this be the news. And Democrats say, well, we'll call you when something happens. We'll tell you what we think of it. But they're not all that great at proactively generating that sort of... What do you want to see covered? I don't know. True stuff, I guess. All right, well, I don't know. Talk about something true then.
Yeah.
Well, marginal tax rates.
Well, since you brought it up and I sort of tangentially mentioned it, let me do this piece here from Politico Magazine, which is by Ryan Burge, who's a religion expert.
Oh.
The religious landscape is undergoing massive change. It could decide the 2024 election. The new decennial religion census offers cause for hope and alarm for both parties.
Oh, all right. Sure, both parties.
Well, because
good,
things are changing, but not in the same way. So,
I see.
Like, if you said, do you remember what used to be called the God gap? That more religious people vote Republicans and less religious people vote Democrats?
I wasn't Wasn't aware that anyone had written that book, but okay.
The Godcat we used to call it in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
So the idea that the Republican Party is the one that fights for the rights of religious individuals, primarily Christians, while Democrats have become increasingly secular. Well, people aren't fleeing organized religion at equal rates across the United States. So if you were to guess, which areas have seen a wholesale abandoning of organized religion, what areas of the United States would you guess that would show up the most?
Oh, now I feel trapped. I would guess, I guess maybe because I'm old-fashioned, I would guess coastally.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Everybody always says, Pacific Northwest or New England.
Okay, that's coastal, sure. Yeah.
But the drops in adherence in these parts of the country are pretty much, which is true. I mean, they are happening.
Okay.
But they're fairly modest compared to other regions, like across the industrial Midwest, for example.
Well, that's where the people who practice religions practice them modestly. So,
in former Rust Belt states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania that are absolutely essential to the Democrats' firewall in 2024, each of these states is much less religious today than it was just 10 years ago.
Aha.
For example, of Michigan's 83 counties, 65 experienced a drop in religious adherence between 2010 and 2020. In Oakland County, which is very populous, Maricopa County, like in Arizona, or Clark County in Nevada, it's not quite that dominant, but it's pretty large, which encompasses the far northern suburbs of Detroit. The share of people affiliated with a religious congregation dropped 2% in the prior decade, and that drop in share coincided with a rise in Democratic fortunes. Joe Biden won the county by 108,000 votes, more than double Barack Obama's margin. Oakland County points to a future where Democrats have an easier pathway to victory as churches, synagogues, and mosques continue to empty out. And another example, suburban Philadelphia's Bucks County. Pennsylvania's fourth most populous county. It's often seen as a bellwether for the national political trends. And in 2012, Obama took Bucks County by 1 percentage point. In 2020, Biden won by 5. The share of the county aligned with a religious congregation dropped by nearly 18 points between 2010 and 2020 to make his point. Easily the largest drop by a populous county in the state of Pennsylvania.
All right. These are some, and at the margin, small numbers, but I guess you're talking about such a sizable population. A couple percentage points makes a big difference.
Yeah, and it's also a difference between winning the state and losing the state with an electoral component to it. And Ryan Birch studies this stuff, Paul Jube and others, and so it's of interest to me because it often tracks with not only how they vote politically, but also what sort of issues really get pushed hard. I mean, you could look at very, very conservative areas of Colorado, for example.
All right.
And sort of guess where they're going to stand on Rob's Doe and Dobbs.
Although, I like the other name too.
Yeah, Rob's Doe. And that sort of thing. On the other hand, if you're looking specifically at Florida and Texas with an influx of Latinos and Hispanics, they've become more religious and less sensitive, less accepting of the ideas that abortion access is a big deal that should dictate their vote. Which is one of the reasons why Democrats have had some trouble in certain areas in Texas and Florida in gathering votes to their side. So between Texas and Florida, that looks better for Republicans as that's becoming more religious. But in areas of the Midwest, that's looking really good for Democrats, where the opposite is saying. So Ryan Birch writes, it goes without saying, the dramatic rise in religion in many counties in Florida and Texas is deeply intertwined with the increasing number of Hispanic immigrants. The Democrats showed real weakness with the Hispanic vote in the last several election cycles, especially in areas where religion has tremendous influence. And survey data indicates that recent immigrants to the U.S. report very high levels of religious attendance and prayer frequency, which predisposes this group to cultural conservatism. So you'd think that Republicans would be totally open to the idea of immigration because it's good for them.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. I was actually thinking about, I don't know how wise it is to say, and I'm sure that the people doing the study would say, you'd want to look deeper at this, that not all religions encourage the same sort of political response, let's say, in their adherence across the board. You're a religious organization, therefore you're producing this kind of response. So that's probably not true. But, no, I like that other interesting point, too. You should be, how happy should you be about a number of conservative Catholics wanting to come into the country, establish themselves as citizens, and start voting? Why don't you get out of the way?
Why don't you? So the overall sense, Rice, is that the Democrats will continue to gain ground in suburban counties that are predominantly white and where religion is fading in size and importance. And in so-called blue wall states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Republicans will have a harder time winning over voters in suburban Milwaukee, Detroit, or Philadelphia with messaging about 6-week abortion bans. On the other hand, the shifts in religious landscape make it more likely the GOP can hold off Democratic advances in important states like Texas and Florida. As more Hispanic immigrants come to the area, Democratic messaging on social issues will not appeal to these types of voters. And it's hard to overstate this point. In 1990, just 7% of Americans were non-religious. 30 years later, the nuns, as they're called, not N-U-N-S, but N-O-N-E-S,
yes,
they have no religion, none. The nuns have quadrupled. And new data indicates that nearly half of Generation Z has no religious affiliation.
Huh.
In 2020, 46% of the votes cast for Biden came from non-religious voters.
Okay.
And that could easily be half his base. So both parties have been slow to react to this changing religious landscape. Where the remaining religious Americans live and vote is a crucial question for the electoral map in 2024 and beyond, and both parties are ignoring these changing dynamics at their own peril. So basically, you get a sense of the desperation about trying to make sure that all of these abortion bans get put into place and locked in, and voting patterns as well. When people who are on the Republican side look at this data and they say, oh, my God, we're losing, so we better make sure that, we gerrymander as much as possible. This isn't going to help us win the presidency, but at least maybe we can lock in some House stuff.
What religion is maddest about litter boxes in schools, do we suppose? We got to start some of that.
The winning church.
I guess so.
The church of it's our religion that we have to win at any cost.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know which one that is. Okay. Well, that is interesting, and something to think about the way. Well, that'll cause some difficulties, I suppose, for the same difficulties Democrats always have in holding together a diverse coalition. But the larger the coalition, the easier it is to hold, even though it's diverse. Yeah, it's easier than building a fake coalition. You can break them up with wedge issues, but when the coalition is really big, like it used to be for, let's say, LBJ, it doesn't matter how many wedge issues you have. I guess you always want to have a growing coalition versus the shrinking coalition. And that's why Simon Rosenberg and his Hopium Chronicles aims for 55% vote for Democrats, because when you get to be at that point, you can lose some of your coalition and still win. Okay. And sometimes the part of your coalition that you lose will be driven straight back into your hands by weird and contradictory policies from the other side. Or maybe who the candidate is. So that leads to this Axios piece called The GOP Shrinking Senate Map. Aha. By Josh Krashour, of all people. Conservative columnist who's really into crime and caravans. One of the biggest immediate consequences of if Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket, Republicans may campaign aggressively in fewer Senate battleground races. And this comes from his talking to Mitch McConnell. Driving the news, Axios style is little points that explain to you what the points are in case you missed it. Yes. Driving the news, in an interview with CNN last week, Mitch McConnell was cautious about the number of top GOP pickup opportunities. He only listed 4 Democratic-held seats as top opportunities: West Virginia, Montana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Why it matters: if Trump's endorsements of weak candidates hurt GOP prospects in 2022,
and I'm really waiting for the voices in Doug Mastriano's head to tell him what to do in Pennsylvania. If Trump's endorsements of weak candidates, and notice he didn't have Arizona on that list. If Trump's endorsements of weak candidates hurt GOP prospects in 2022, it's the prospect that Trump will lead the GOP presidential ticket that could jeopardize purple state opportunities. Democratic-held Senate seats in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Nevada would typically be toss-ups, with Maine, Virginia, and New Mexico representing second tier, but McConnell only mentioned Wisconsin and Nevada as other races. Arizona's a wild card. There's a high likelihood, McConnell said, that Republican leaders would wait to see who wins the GOP primary before deciding what to do in Arizona.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And despite the Democratic divisions, one recent public poll showed Ruben Gallego, leading Carrie Lake and Kirsten Sinema in a three-way race. That would be where Gallego's the Democrat, Lake's the Republican, and Sinema's the Independent.
Yeah.
Reality check, Trump's still a political asset in the three red state seats held by Democrats up for re-election, West Virginia, Montana, and Ohio. Winning just two of those three is all Republicans need.
I see.
So I can see them winning West Virginia easily enough. Manchin isn't necessarily in tune with his constituents, no matter how hard he's trying to be these last few months. Montana is really the key race there. Ohio's tough, but if you hold Tester, and you can hold Ohio, then you can lose West Virginia and still do okay.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I'm not. I don't hold out too much hope for West Virginia. That's okay.
No, I'm not even sure Manchin's going to run for Senate.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll do,
just go on his boat and relax.
A Joe Lieberman no labels ticket. Which would be a win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I guess maybe. Well, so long. Well,
if he's going to lose anyway, get him out of the Democratic Party.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, the part of the show, the deal as the show goes is we talk about things and you listen. And now I'm thinking, what else have we got to talk about? We were just actually discussing that. Early this morning, it was a little iffy. What? And you were just kind of, it doesn't look like this or sound like that you had any question about at all what you were. So that's your professionalism, Greg, coming through. It didn't sound at all like you were unsure which direction to go. But yeah, well, I guess you're really reviewing what you've put together. There's plenty to fill the time, certainly, but it was kind of a slow as news weekends go. It's not even Memorial Day weekend yet.
So,
that'll be super slow,
speaking of news, there's always politics news.
Yes.
And the New York Times did its political thing. The New York Times is a fantastic paper for investigative reporting. They continue to have
so.
just incredible breaking news on stories that you can't find anywhere else, and they get to first. On the other hand, when they do politics, they don't necessarily live up to their investigative reporting standard. They don't necessarily get to that high bar.
They should look into that, investigate it.
So this is a piece about Ron DeSantis.
Boo. Yeah.
And even the New York Times.
Even the liberal New York Times says... What?
Why Ron DeSantis is limping to the starting line.
Oh, okay. Well, liberals would say that, but okay.
Mr. DeSantis and his allies are retooling his expected run for the White House after a series of missteps and miscalculations allowed Donald J. Trump to define the 2024 Republican race.
He was going to do that anyway.
The really interesting thing, and I can't remember her name. I can't forget who she is, and I can't remember her name. But there's a political operative who used to work for DeSantis, who DeSantis insulted once too often because he's doesn't do human contact really well and never compliments people for what they do. So she left, and she's helping to organize and run the Trump campaign.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know if I know who that is.
Right. Susan Wild, a name similar to that. Just it's escaping me at the moment. But why Ron DeSantis is limping to the starting line? Well, the Trump organization for the campaign is, in fact, organized for a change and focused on destroying Ron DeSantis.
Oh.
And DeSantis
okay, that's good.
is like, well, we'll just wait. We'll just sit back. We'll just see what happens. And it's not working.
Okay. All right. What do I say about that? All right, good. I mean, Ron DeSantis is horrific.
Right. Susie Wiles is her name.
Susie Wiles. Okay.
She helped Trump win Florida twice. Now she could lead his expected 2024 campaign. That's a sidebar, but I just thought I'd throw that in because that's the person who I was trying to think of. But it's just indicative of the way Ron DeSantis treats people. So
she was only with
in this particular piece here, why Ron DeSantis is limping to the starting line. It's got some really interesting excerpts here. One Trump endorser, Representative Lance Gooden of Texas, backed the former president only hours after attending a private group meeting with DeSantis. And that's such a typical story. I can't decide between them. Let me just talk to Ron DeSantis one last time. Oh, my God, I'm endorsing Trump. In an interview, Mr. Gooden likened DeSantis' decision to delay entry until after a legislative session to the example of a past Texas governor, Rick Perry, who did the same a decade ago and quickly flamed out of the 2012 contest. He's relied, much like Rick Perry did, remember, Gooden is from Texas, on local political experts in his home state that just don't know the presidential landscape, Mr. Gooden said. Oh. And interestingly enough, Rick Perry is already making noises lately about that perhaps he'll run for president, too. He won't endorse Trump, and maybe he'll run in 2024.
He won't endorse him. He was what the hell was he? Energy secretary, but...
Yeah, and my Twitter friend, political scientist William Adler said, there's 3 reasons why this is a bad idea. And I mentioned, I can only remember 2 of them, though.
Oh, okay.
Oops.
Well, that was a major black mark for him. Yeah, I mean,
he's a lightweight. He's a policy lightweight.
He never.
And who cares about Rick Perry anymore?
No, it seems like a horrible idea. But I guess he's just trying to keep himself relevant.
Remember that guy who used to be governor of Louisiana and wanted to build berms in order to stop hurricanes?
I don't know.
Bobby Jindal.
Oh, is that what he wanted to do?
Bright light.
Okay. I just remember the volcano thing
of techie. Nerdy type Republican,
Yes.
Whatever happened to that guy? Whatever
true.
happened to Rick Perry?
Well, he said that they should stop being the stupid party, and apparently...
Or Megyn Kelly or Glenn Beck or a whole bunch of other people who these are... Well, who are they now? Where are they now?
Well, that's true. That's interesting. And that Trump is a career killer for everybody, I guess, and... I don't know. I guess they figure, well, maybe that's why people go back to him and end up endorsing him and say, there's no way around him, so I just have to follow behind him, and then maybe one day if he drops dead, I'll be in the lead of the parade somehow.
Yeah. It's the old joke, of course, which is still true, and I used to see it on Yes Minister all the time, is if you want to talk a politician out of doing something, just tell them how courageous they are. What do you mean? Oh, my God. What do you say?
You mean I'm leading in this? This is
what do you mean courageous? I thought this was like really popular. He said, well, Minister, it's very courageous. I commend you on taking this courageous stance. Oh, my God. I better rethink everything if you're saying that.
Rick Perry. Well, they often say that the road to the White House runs through Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah. Well, the other, piece, the snippet that I took from that article that just rang a bell with me, struck a chord, as it will, musically inclined. The governor and his team have had internal conversations acknowledging the need for him to engage in the basics of political courtship. Small talk, handshaking,
forget it.
Eye contact. I could have thrown in kissing babies. And, all the Twitter memes were just going to town on this.
Yeah. Well,
yes, I really need to be more human. I must reprogram my smile.
Yeah. Although, I mean, there are certainly weird aspects of Trump, but he does, I don't know what, he clasps people's hands and smiles for photos.
He's a he's a naturally gifted con man.
Yeah. I mean,
Ron DeSantis really is not. He's just a mean-spirited technocrat. He's, he's Michael Dukakis if he woke up on the evil side.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
And yeah. I just, same height too, and same tank boots. Picture.
Right.
I just don't see it. I don't see how DeSantis expands his, base. And that's the thing about Trump. One of the big things about politics is that you win with a 50+1 vote.
Yeah, right.
And percentage-wise. And you look at Trump, and you look at that CNN town hall, which was a disaster for CNN, as it turns out. None of they got good ratings that night. Then the next day went right back to the terrible doldrums they were in. Everybody's criticizing them, including from within. Chris Lick, the CEO, had to call in Oliver Darcy, his own media critic, and say, hey, lay off CNN for a while. And Darcy said, nah, I don't think so.
Okay.
And, it just went terribly for them.
Well, good.
But for Trump,
yes,
you look at Trump and say, well, he's happy with it because it helped them with his MAGA base and it helped them against DeSantis. Mm-hmm. But how does seeing Trump on a big screen on something like a CNN town hall, and they're talking about doing more according to Axios.
Oh, wonderful.
How does that help him get one more vote than he otherwise had? What is he doing to expand his appeal to those beyond who already voted for him?
Yeah, I guess there's
with the group he has, he's already lost the election.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to expand it and do better? He's not. I mean, what did he do at CNN to help with that in any way, shape, or form? Inquiring minds want to know. I can't figure it out. I mean, nothing. He's done nothing to try to expand his base, and he's doing everything to push more people away. So I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just the trappings of, if not office, then importance. And I'll take it. It's attention, and people who are already going to vote for me will have some things to laugh at liberals about. And I don't know. And maybe, unless there's the theory that there are some people who are, super dumb and might be into Trump and just missed the whole prior thing. Oh yeah, he ran for president. Oh, wish I had paid attention to that and voted then. But I'll do it this time. Yeah.
Yeah. But for which one?
I'm not certain that they are, worth the investment, but I don't know. I don't know what he just likes playing the role of president. I don't know that there's any strategy per se. The people who are supposed to come up with strategy will say that.
Perry, Chris Christie, there's a handful of Republicans who have said, you know what, Trump is really not going to help us. We're going to lose if he is the nominee.
Right.
And they're so far being ignored in terms of being Republican presidential candidates. Rightly so. They have no chance of winning. But in terms of their analysis of what happens come November, they 2024, they may well be correct. Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis is the only one who seems like he has a credible chance of stopping Trump. Back to this New York Times article. In 6 short months from November to May, DeSantis' 2024 run has faltered before it has even begun. Remember, he's not a declared candidate. He's going to have to declare in the next 2 weeks because he's spending too much money and they have to declare that sort of stuff. So allies have abandoned him. Tales of his icy interpersonal touch. I love the way they put the fact that the guy doesn't know how to deal with humans.
Yeah.
Tales of his icy interpersonal touch have spread. Donors have groused, and a legislative session in Tallahassee designed to burnish his conservative credentials has instead coincided with a drop in the polls.
Oh.
That's the part I never understand about Tallahassee and Florida people, why they're so scared of this guy. They do everything he asks. Voters don't like it and don't want it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I guess, the inside game, and a person who's governor can
back to that
power
Matt
and do
thing,
bad things.
Local people, have no idea about the national landscape and are giving him all sorts of bad advice. His decision not to begin any formal campaign until after the Florida legislative session, allowing him to cast himself as a conservative fighter who not only won but actually delivered results, instead opened a window of opportunity for Trump. The former president filled that void with personal attacks and a heavy rotation of negative advertising from his super PAC. Combined with DeSantis' cocooning himself in the right-wing media and Trump team's success in outflanking him on several fronts, the governor's lost control of his own national narrative. And as his Tallahassee-based operation pivots to formally entering the race, DeSantis and his allies are retooling for a more aggressive new phase. I'm telling you, they're reprogramming his smile. They think that's going to work.
I mean, what else have they got to do? There's no, I don't know what I would
advise them. We have to find out who did this.
Yeah. How do we get here?
Hello, fellow kids. What's going on? His staunchest supporters privately acknowledged DeSantis needs to recalibrate a political outreach and media strategy that has allowed Mr. Trump to define the race. In other words, he's getting clobbered with his current approach.
Well, it was a tall
his
order.
Current strategy. Both his strategy and his tactics are failing. How do you expect to win this political war?
No, I don't expect him to do that, but that's not my job. It was a tall order for anybody, and a skilled politician would have difficulty finding ways to knock Trump from the top spot in the party and attracting all the attention, and he's just not one. And I guess now he's finding out, he was never popular in Congress, but people were perfectly happy to park him in Florida where he won't be in anybody's way. And, I don't know. I guess in Florida, he's a big shot. And in the legislature, they feel like they have to listen to him or they'll be punished.
Yeah.
So,
he was a pain in the neck in the cabinet, so they made him ambassador to Iceland.
Basically.
He's a big deal in Iceland, but
he's
out of the cabinet. That's
huge in Japan. Yeah, right. That they were perfectly happy to endorse him for the Florida race because no one liked working with him in Congress. There was, and it was little point for him to stick around anyway. But I guess that's what happens is if they, you fool yourself into believing that you're a national force because, Florida's a big state. It was just really, they were like, you want to run for governor in Florida? I mean, I don't care. Sure, I'll endorse you for that. Fine, whatever. Not even necessarily because I need you to get out of here in Congress. It was just, I don't really give a crap who's the governor of Florida. You want to do it? Go ahead. You do it. I'll endorse you. I've met you. I'll endorse you. Terrific. Go ahead. Have a great time. You want to come back here and be the boss of me? No, that's not happening. I'll endorse Trump. And that's really stupid. Just to show you how dumb I am, I'd rather endorse that.
I'll give you one more chance. Oh, I just reminded myself of what a jerk you are.
Yeah.
I am endorsing Trump. Right. I mean, that happened over and over and over, including with the Florida delegation. So it's amazing. Now, this is also, these gossipy tidbits from the Times story are important to me, not because they're gossipy tidbits about DeSantis, but what they say about the American voter writ large on a bigger stage. A book tour that was supposed to have introduced him nationally was marked by missteps that deepened concerns about his readiness for that biggest stage. He took positions on two pressing domestic and international issues, abortion and the war in Ukraine, that generated second-guessing and backlash among some allies and would-be benefactors. The money guys in the GOP aren't hard right religious conservatives. They just want lower taxes.
Yes. And
they've always gone
eternal
ahead
life.
and said, well, we need the MAGA voters, we need the religious right voters, whatever, so long as we win, because once we're in, you give us lower taxes.
Yeah.
And DeSantis is so right-wing and so hardcore, they're even throwing off the money guys.
Mm-hmm.
The move he's made to appeal to the hard right, for example, escalating his feud with Disney, signaling a strict 6-week abortion ban, is unnerved donors. I was in the DeSantis camp, said Andrew Sabin, a metals magnate who gave the Florida governor $50,000 last year, but he started opening his mouth, and a lot of big donors said his views aren't tolerable, specifically citing abortion in Ukraine.
Oh. Well, that is interesting. I didn't know that the abortion thing would bother them so much. Ukraine,
well, they tend to be libertarian, and they see it as a political loser, and they're not happy with it. 3 billionaires who are major GOP donors, Steve Wynn, Ike Perlmutter, and Thomas Petterfee, a past DeSantis patron who is publicly soured on him, dined recently with Vivek Ramaswamy, a 37-year-old long-shot Republican.
All right.
And the early months of 2023 have exposed a central challenge for DeSantis, who the Times insists on calling Mr. DeSantis because it's the New York Times. He needs to stitch. I'm not calling him Mr. DeSantis, and I am definitely not calling him Mr. Trump. You can suck on it.
Yeah. Okay.
As Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, might say.
Yeah.
He needs to stitch together an unwieldy ideological coalition bridging both anti-Trump Republicans and Trump supporters who are nonetheless considering turning the page on the past president. Hitting and hugging Trump at the same time has bedeviled rivals since Ted Cruz tried to do so in 2016.
Right.
And by the way, Cruz veterans fill key roles in Mr. DeSantis' campaign and super PAC. I love that. So you take a loser, and you take his loser brain trust, and you put him in your brain trust, and you're losing the same way that Cruz lost, and then you step back and say, well, how can that be?
Yeah, look at this loser. I got to move on to another loser or turn someone else into a loser.
Now, allies of both Republicans, Trump and DeSantis, caution that it's still early. Guys, they are who they are. That ain't going to change.
Yeah. Well,
that's always the conceit of the political consultant. I know who he is, but I'll get in there and I'll make things so that we win anyway. And it never works. It never works.
Yeah, I mean, they either have a certain level of skill or they don't. This other guy that you mentioned, it's
I'll make DeSantis into a baby kissing machine. Yeah, good luck.
Okay, I exactly. I can teach the.
You made him into a machine. The baby kissing part, you weren't supposed to eat the baby. He's
chewing on them. What's happening? But what's his name? Vivek Ramaswamy, or is that what he's that? Now that's somebody. I mean, he's got nothing policy wise, but he's somehow who's working for him.
That should be the no labels ticket. I think Marianne Williamson at the top, and Ramaswamy should be the VP.
Maybe
that'd be great.
I think. Well, I mean, hopefully no one will vote for that, but he's somehow. I don't know who's doing his PR work, but he's placed himself everywhere. And he knows he has to endure everybody laughing and saying, "Psh, that guy. Why is anybody paying any attention to him?"
Who's the libertarian jerk who was running
everywhere
for the Democrats, who I can't even remember anymore in the last election?
What? I don't know. Who? Where? Who are we looking at?
The Democratic primary.
Democratic primary, and somebody, I don't know. What?
Some rich libertarian guy, who, along with Marianne Williamson, was getting a lot of attention and had plans for, we'll pay everybody. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my point.
I do know, and now I can't say point. Andrew.
Andrew something.
Hey, Andrew, what's your last name? I don't know. Now I can't remember anymore. Well, there you go.
Right.
That's the point.
That's Ramaswamy. I have enough money, so I can call people and do my own publicity and get people to pay attention to me as if I matter, which of course I
Yang.
don't.
I had to look it up.
Yeah, see?
Andrew Yang, right. I was going to say Vermin Supreme.
Well, he's the Republican version.
He is
just,
actually.
Just like Ron DeSantis is this year's Scott Walker, this year's Rick Perry, this year's Rudy Giuliani as presidential candidate. A lot of hype, then they flame out. This year's Fred Thompson. You pick him.
Yeah.
Ramaswamy is this year's Andrew Yang, Marianne Williamson.
All rolled into one, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the
he's
way,
doing
RFK
a great job
Jr.
making
is
himself
this year's,
visible.
RFK Jr.
Oh, yeah. I don't even want to think about that, but if I'm forced to at some later date, I will.
Mm. So here's a piece from NBC News about your home state.
Mine.
Virginia joins the list of GOP states leaving bipartisan effort to combat voter fraud amid conspiracies. Whoa. The state was one of the founding members when the Electronic Registration Information Center, otherwise known as ERIC, was formed in 2012. That was something that was started by Bob McDonnell, if you remember him.
Yeah. The guy who likes golf clubs.
When Virginia formally withdraws later this year, it'll become the 8th Republican-led state to leave ERIC, since the group was targeted in a series of online stories last year that questioned its funding and purpose. Trump has been among those calling on Republican state officials to leave. Virginia Elections Commissioner Susan Beals, in a letter sent Thursday to ERIC, listed several reasons for the decision, including incomplete participation by Virginia's bordering states and, quote, increasing concerns regarding stewardship, maintenance, privacy, and confidentiality, unquote, of voter information.
Mm-hmm. So it's like Twitter.
Yeah. Beals,
they want to get out,
used to serve as an aide to a local Republican, you may know that the rest of the country probably doesn't, named Amanda Chase.
Oh, yeah.
She previously served as an aide to Republican State Senator Amanda Chase, who since the 2020 election has become a prominent promoter of Trump's false claims of widespread fraud. There was no evidence of fraud, but nonetheless, people are using that as an excuse to get out of ERIC. But they really have against ERIC, by the way. Is ERIC also motor voter, gets people to get registered. They don't like that.
Yeah, you would think they would be interested in a way to check against other states, and are people registered in more than one state, and can we nail them for fraud, and here's a mechanism to do it. But it also actually helps people vote, so we can't have
Well, that's the part they don't like.
I gotcha. So that's why they want out. Amanda Chase, by the way, has been mentioned several times in the show. Super kook. Let's see, at one point stopped by the cops at the Capitol complex and did the whole "do you know who I am" kind of thing, and flashed badges and yada yada. She brings her gun to work, and I think she was the one that they ended up during the mid-pandemic time wouldn't wear the mask, so they built a plexiglass box around her on the Senate floor, like her own isolation chamber. No one wanted to breathe her air. She's a real goofball and dangerous in that sense. But she did the other thing too. All the women who are like that in the various states who like to say that they're Trump in heels. Although Trump himself wears heels, so I guess it doesn't make as much sense. And it never caught on, and she went nowhere, and there you go. So that's who runs elections for super moderate vest guy Glenn Youngkin. There you go. I think we now know what we need to know about her.
I think so. Anyway, so Virginia's taking that route, and unfortunately so. It's too bad. By the way, I think we'll finish the show by talking just a little bit about Ukraine.
Okay.
Which we haven't talked about in a while. But it really does look like, and fog of war and all of that, but it really does look like Bakhmut really has reached a culmination point.
Okay.
And a culmination point is when you get to the point where you can't really go forward anymore, and now you have to start defending and figuring out how to withdraw. You are no longer capable of doing offensive gains, and that's where the Russian army is. Now there's all these stories. This one, Washington Post yesterday. Wagner chief offered to give Russian troops locations to Ukraine, leak says. This is part of the Discord leaks. I guess that was that right-wing nutcase who leaked all the information. Now they're dealing not with the right-wing nutcase who's, looks like a Nazi, but now they're dealing with the leaks of the information that he put out there on Discord.
Yeah.
Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's the head of Wagner, said he would tell Ukraine's military where to attack Russian troops if they pulled their own forces back from the beleaguered city of Bakhmut, where Wagner mercenaries were taking heavy losses.
Oh.
So basically, the story is he was talking to the Ukrainians about protecting his own groups, and in return was giving them information to kill Russians.
Wow, that's
in the regular
army side of warlordism.
Yeah. So, in an interview with the Washington Post this month, Ukrainian President Zelensky would not confirm the contacts with Prigozhin, but there's no debating Prigozhin's bitter frustration with the grinding fight in Bakhmut. He's complained publicly and privately the Russian Defense Ministry has not given his fighters the ammunition he needs and all this other stuff. And Michael Weiss, who's an analyst, says whether the Ukrainians have cultivated and manipulated Prigozhin or it just wants the world, read the Kremlin, to think it has.
Yeah,
this is an absolutely banger PSYOP campaign.
Yeah, it really would be.
This is heads we win, tails you lose. The best case is Prigozhin was egged on to turn against the Ministry of Defense, so chaos and confusion on the Russian side. And the worst case is Putin kills Prigozhin, and that's the end of Wagner.
Yeah. I mean, it's an excellent candidate for something that was totally made up in the hopes that paranoid Putin would believe it. And
it's not that Putin is that stupid, but I do hear he's building a 9-story building in Bakhmut, so it has a window on the 9th floor getting ready for Prigozhin to go take a look at it.
Right. And it doesn't, all it really has to do, it doesn't even have to succeed necessarily in making Putin believe it. It just has to make Prigozhin worry that what if Putin believes it, I can't go back to Moscow. And then he starts heading for someplace safe and deprives Putin of his right hand, even though Putin calls him and says, I don't believe
Phillips
this stuff.
O'Brien, who's the analyst we've been looking to see what's going on, who came up with this culmination stuff weeks ago. Now, for a while, there's been discussion about when the Russian offensive would culminate or reach the point where the attacks would stop because of an inability of the Russians to keep up the momentum. The assumption was Russian command would be rational and that it would stop its offensive when the costs incurred became all out of whack to the gains. It was widely known more advanced Western equipment was being shipped to Ukraine, and it was judged the Russians would stop. But they never did, which was a surprise and welcome one for the Ukrainians. Instead of doing the rational thing and culminating, they kept feeding more and more forces into the fight, particularly Bakhmut, and making painfully small advances. Frankly, it looked like strategic insanity from the Russian point of view, wasting forces for no purpose, and that's basically what happened.
Okay. Well, there's layers and layers to this one, so I'll be very interested to see how this plays out. Could be brilliant, or it could just be, face value. He really did do this thing, which would be damn interesting all by itself.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll talk
Thanks,
more
Greg.
on Wednesday.
Yes. All right, we'll do that way. That's a great plan. We should implement it now, and this is the culmination point of it for today. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm now fascinated by that story. I don't think I had put it aside. I saw the Prigozhin story, and I didn't really fully. I didn't read it. Well, that'll make it difficult to grasp the enormity of the article. If you just say, what if I don't read it or pay any attention to it? Will I grasp the enormity of it? Unlikely. But it is interesting in terms of layers upon layers of double crossing and double, triple crossing, and the idea that you could plant a story like that. It would seem unlikely at first, I guess, that Prigozhin, who is an oligarch type ally, a very close ally of Putin's, and this is the guy who he owns both. He's a diverse. He's a businessman with a diverse portfolio, right? He's both got the catering business that leads people to refer to him as Putin's chef, right? And also a mercenary operation. You wouldn't think that those things go hand in hand, but that's the way conglomerate business works. And but an interesting thing, on the one hand, could you believe that someone who was loyal to Putin, if he ever was or still is, although I feel like they've been trying to plant stories about there being some space between them lately, and it was difficult to tell whether that's fabricated stories or whether that's Prigozhin doing it because does he genuinely want space between him and Putin, or does he perhaps he sees himself as a possible successor to Putin? If enough people who are oligarchs close to Putin either fall out of windows or are afraid that they are the next ones to fall out of windows, they may get together and try to arrange for Putin to fall out of a window. And then I guess there would be the question of who would step into his shoes if that were to happen. And because obviously the answer isn't, well, why don't we ask the Russian electorate who they want to succeed him as Russian leader? Because they don't do that. And so I guess it's possible that people like Prigozhin could be saying, I'm sort of first among equals in terms of the oligarch circle, so clearly it would be me. And to signal my readiness for it, I will occasionally drop these hints that I'm, willing to take that role or willing to put distance between myself and Putin. But that could just as easily be other people saying, no, I still think Putin has has iron-fisted control over everything in Russia. And if I drop the hint that Prigozhin is something less than loyal, then he'll fall out of a window, and then I'll be in a position to be the person who might take over should Putin ever fall out of a window. Meanwhile, on the other side of the equation, Putin is possibly, this can explain why he sits 30 feet away from his closest allies and everybody else whenever he meets with people, because he thinks somebody's going to throw him out a window, metaphorically speaking. That is to say, it's not a metaphor, well, they're going to what I mean is that they would kill him politically, not literally. No, I meant literally they would kill him. It's just might not be that they throw him out of a window. That's the metaphor. They could shoot him, poison him, stab him, whatever. But metaphorically, he's being thrown out a window, you see. He still dies in the end of all this. But, it's difficult to tell how much of it he believes, how much of it is just always caution, the fact that they're involved in a war and it's costing oligarchs money. And that's, after all, what drives these mobster types. It's nothing personal, it's just business, and I'm losing money because you're running the mob poorly, and we'll just get somebody else to do it. And Putin anticipating that and thinking about how can I maneuver to get this guy thrown out of a window but make it look like one of my other right-hand guys did the throwing. And is it did he do the defenestration because he's loyal to me, or did he do the defenestration because he thinks that he'll step into the shoes of possible successor, and everybody has to be on their toes at all times? It's no way to live. Let's say that. And I guess that would lead me to a story that another one that I didn't pick up on because I thought, this is kind of a crazy story, and I don't know if I believe it or not. And it seems like it might be kind of not really happening the way they say it was going to happen. But what did I look at? Was it? Yeah, I think, let me see if I can find it again. I may have, where did I see it this morning? It may have been in one of the Daily Kos roundups of the, top diaries or something like that. Let's see. I was scanning this one, that there was some idea that, I don't see it in this list as prominently as before, but the idea that the Russians might be, I bet I can find it in my email, thinking of establishing some sort of enclave, that the rumor was that they would establish this enclave for right-wing Americans and Canadians, for whatever reason, to flee to Russia, and I guess the sort of right-wing Nazi activist types who would then flee to this enclave to live in freedom in Russia, which is not the way things typically actually go in Russia, and you shouldn't. I guess you should take it with a grain of salt. But now I can't find the article, and it wasn't entirely clear from the article it was based on how seriously they even took it. I guess they were just sort of, well, this is a rumor that's out there, and take it for what it's worth. But I guess, I only throw that out there to say, why am I bothering to warn people off this? If you're thinking of moving to Russia to live in freedom because you're a right-winger who loves your freedom, it's an awfully dumb thing to do, and I guess in this sense you should listen to those who came before you in ultra-right-wing politics and distrust Russia and the Russians. You probably should. That might actually serve you well, and perhaps you'd prefer to stay away. But hey, on the other hand, why should I be bothered with warning you? You'll find out soon enough. Anyway, I don't know. That was kind of weird, and I thought that was out there and weird, and you might find it of some value. Maybe that leads me to this one too. I put something aside that I ordinarily wouldn't, largely because it was written by Dana Milbank, who I very frequently will say, to hell with that guy. I don't want to read what he has to say. But every once in a while, he does a good job with these things and puts together an article that's worth discussing with you. And this is one of them. I'm reminded of it by, the discussion we were just having. When is this from? May 12th. So that was Friday, I think. The day free market Republicans became Soviet economic planners. Oh, yeah. Well, he's talking about a slightly different subject, but it fits nicely into the discussion of the dumb idea of the Russians creating a freedom enclave outside of Moscow for American and Canadian far-right figures. I guess if you can believe we've gotten to that stage, then you... or if you can't believe we've gotten to that stage, then I guess you could read this story, which is actually, fairly well backed with real-life examples of things happening that are extraordinarily dumb and not explainable in any other way. But here you go. The day free market Republicans became Soviet economic planners. And there were several days that they became that. Can you remember, he begins by asking, when Republicans still believed in the free market? I suspect that they never really did, but it was something they said a lot. It was sometime before Donald Trump started routine attacks on the, quote, globalists of Goldman Sachs and the leaders of large U.S. corporations, before Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida used tax policy to attack the Walt Disney Company because it dared to disagree with his Don't Say Gay legislation. Actually, that came to mind as Greg was discussing the backers, early DeSantis backers becoming disenchanted and walking away. And I was wondering whether, because, all I want is low taxes. I didn't want all this stupid culture war stuff. But in addition to not being on board for culture war stuff, and they might very well, in some cases be on board for culture war stuff, even if it's not taxes, it's, I'm an investor in some of these large corporations that you're actually attacking over culture war issues, like, say, Walt Disney. And I put a lot of my money there, not because I want to make cartoons, but because I want to make money. And now you're making it difficult for me to make money, and I'm not making as much as I should be making, and that's as bad for me in my bottom line as not handing me the tax breaks I wanted. Or if you do hand me tax breaks, but then I make less money because you've attacked my sources of income, I'm no happier. So maybe I want off of this train at some point. So before Trump was attacking Goldman Sachs as globalists, before DeSantis was attacking the Walt Disney Company because they dared to disagree with the Don't Say Gay bill, before congressional Republicans harassed social media companies and book publishers over alleged, quote, censorship of their views, before they threatened Delta Airlines, United Airlines, Major League Baseball, everybody else, over their support for voting rights, before they vowed to use federal resources to retaliate against the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for backing a few Democrats, and then established a weaponization of government committee. Before Republican governors enacted laws overriding private employers' coronavirus vaccination policies, and before GOP-led states moved to disrupt interstate commerce by to block abortion access and morning after pills. This week, that was last week, brought the latest evidence that the former party of laissez-faire capitalism has reimagined itself in the image of a Soviet state planning committee. How do you like that? Republican lawmakers are now telling investors which businesses they can and can't invest in, and which investment criteria they will be permitted to consider. You remember I told you at the end of last week, in Thursday's pre-recorded show, in fact, about what was going on with Oklahoma and banning its, quote, woke banks from doing business with the state. Well, I guess that's happening in a lot of places. The House Oversight Committee, Dana Milbank continues, staged a hearing to denounce asset managers for using, quote, environmental, social, and governance criteria, or ESG, when making their investments, and to plot ways to stop investors from doing this terrible thing. An unelected cabal of global elites are using ESG, a woke economic strategy, to hijack our capitalist system, declared an overwrought Steve Marshall, Alabama Attorney General. They're doing the same thing as Oklahoma, I guess. And one of two GOP expert witnesses, if you can call them that, at the anti-investor hearing. For those who didn't understand him the first time, Marshall used the word elites 13 times and woke 20 times in his opening testimony. Really trying to drive the point home here. Although, one, the point isn't much of a point, and two, it's homeless, so don't try to drive it anywhere. The other GOP witness, Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes, declared that there exists a conspiracy of ESG-minded investors. He was particularly worried that asset managers who collectively own significant percentages of utilities stock are improperly influencing the operation of those utilities. Really? Isn't it interesting that now the capitalist owners of the means of production are actually deciding to produce things differently than you were hoping they would based on your investment portfolio, and you need to now use the government to make it illegal for those people to invest in the things that they think will make money, because instead they should be forced to invest in, one, the things that they think have no future and won't make money, and two, that you own. So essentially, this is really interesting, just using the government to force investors, institutional investors, to give you money. And I mean, it really does come down to just give you money, because you're asking them to invest in something that they don't believe has the best investment potential for their investment dollars, and that they think will actually lose money, and they will lose it by shoveling it into your pockets. No, they don't want any part of this, but you will use the government's leverage to force them to do that. That's great for capitalism. Imagine that, Dana says. The shareholders who own a company are trying to influence its operations. Will nobody rid us of this capitalist menace? Legislatures in several red states have passed laws championed by oil, gas, and coal companies that essentially pull state pension funds from investment managers unless they invest in, you guessed it, oil, gas, and coal companies. And that's a great way of describing exactly what we found in the story from Oklahoma. You can't invest this money in green technologies because we're not green technologies, and we want you to invest in us. So why don't we make it illegal for you to invest in them? And in fact, why not where we have places like Oklahoma, where such a significant portion of their tax base and jobs base comes from the fossil fuel industry, why not simply declare that to be the state industry and force you to invest in it against your will because capitalism and freedom. I don't know. Why not? And the answer is, I don't know. Let's all just be, what's happening, of course, is the ultimate in gimmitarianism. When you don't find it and call it out and shame it and destroy it where you find it, you end up with this. So, okay, this astonishes Dana Milbank, and that's fine. We're glad to have him here. Legislatures, as I said, in several red states passed laws championed by oil, gas, and coal companies, essentially pulling state pension funds from investment managers unless they invest in, you guessed it, oil, gas, and coal companies. Similar laws bar pension plans from working with investment firms that use ESG standards when deciding whether to invest in companies that trash the planet, abuse their workers, or kill their customers. Like you might say, just, free market economics tells me if your company is dedicated to killing its customers and people catch on, they'll stop being customers. And not just because they're dead. They'll preemptively stop being customers and you'll be losing money and investing in you will be a bad idea and therefore will go elsewhere. No, the state says you must invest in those things. Led by Marshall and Reyes, 25 state attorneys general sued the Biden administration, that happens all the time now, probably did it in Amarillo, Texas, to block a regulation that allows retirement plan investors to consider ESG standards. A regulation that would allow, not mandate, but allow, right? He says it in the next sentence. The rule doesn't mandate that investors consider ESG standards. It merely gives them the option. But because they're not weaponizing government and they love free market capitalism, they are going to move to ban a regulation, undo a regulation that gives institutional investors the option of considering it. Legislatures, we jumped back here again. The Democrats' witness in this hearing, by the way, about this bill, Illinois Treasurer Michael Frerichs. I'm hoping I've got the name correct, but those of you in Illinois could tell me, as if, well, a few of you probably listening to the show could say, yeah, I know who the treasurer of Illinois is, but many of you, maybe not so much, but maybe you've heard the name Michael, is it Frerichs? F-R-E-R-I-C-H-S. Well, however you pronounce his name, he called the Republicans' schemes, quite correctly, I guess, anti-free market and anti-investor. The GOP officials would block asset managers from even considering whether, say, a car company is aligned with market expectations and preparing for the shift to electric vehicles, or whether they see that a pharmaceutical company has exposure to massive lawsuits because of its role in the opioid epidemic, or whether healthcare companies understand their operations and understaff. Do they understand their operations? You'd love to know that too. But do they understaff their operations and thereby jeopardize the safety of patients? And remember, Republicans only see, well, you're disinvesting from these sectors where I have friends and who those friends are donating money to my campaign or perhaps to me personally or flying me around on vacations and super yachts or whatever it may be. And they want those investments to go to them, and they think it's illegitimate that investment managers aren't putting all their money in with them, and they say it must be woke ideology. And you ask the investment managers, and they say, well, no, I'm not investing in this car company because they hate oil and gas, as demonstrated by their building more electric vehicles. I am investing with them because I think there's large-scale, widespread consumer interest in electric vehicles, as demonstrated by, facts. And they're building more of the kinds of cars that people are more interested in buying, and buying at premium prices, I might add. So I'm interested in investing with them because I think they'll be early to the market with larger numbers of semi-affordable electric vehicles or whatever, or even if it's luxury electric vehicles that are not that affordable, but people want them, and they're going to sell units. And I want to invest in the people who are going to be selling units. And the oil and gas companies, not the car companies, but the oil and gas companies are saying it should be illegal for you to invest in green stuff because then people won't be spending money on our product. Can't we put a stop to it? Or in other sectors, right? I don't want to invest our institutional money in this or that pharmaceutical company because they are in the middle of a gigantic multi-billion-dollar opioid lawsuit, which I think they stand to lose at least partially, and they're going to lose a tremendous amount of money. And all the money that if we pour money into them as an investment, some portion of it will pour right back through their hands and out into a settlement for the opioid epidemic, which, regardless of how you feel about it, is a poor investment choice, we say. Let's invest with pharmaceutical companies because they do make money, but ones who don't or never did, let's say, if there is such an operation, produce opioid products, and then therefore we're going to avoid having to pay for any opioid liability here. When we invest in them, they can just buy, machines and equipment and hire people and make more money for us. No, you can't consider that. Say, presumably, the opioid producing pharmaceutical companies. You need to force them instead to invest in us. What basis would we have to force them to do that? Well, worrying about opioid settlements is woke. It isn't. It's good investment advice. But if you say it's woke, then that should be enough because no one knows what woke means. That will probably do the trick. That is pretty amazing. Or, for that matter, as they say, we just found out that Health USA, I'm making up, it's a fictional company, it doesn't matter. Widget Health, whatever it might be, is right, doing exactly what you've suspected they've been doing all along, purposefully understaffing their operations or operating in a way that denies people the care that they thought they were paying for when they bought into the insurance scheme. And now they are dying frustrated. And you might say there's some tremendous courtroom liability possible there too. Let's invest with someone else. No, say the gigantic health operations. Why can't we just use the government's power to force them to invest in us anyway? Because capitalism. So that's what Frericks had to say to them, the Illinois treasurer. ESG is simply additional information that investment professionals use to assess risk and return prospects. It doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the politics of it. It's just, look, I think the market is moving this way. Consumers are saying we want green energy stuff. We want sustainable agriculture stuff. We read about it in a magazine. Dumb, smart, doesn't matter. That's where they want to spend their money. The smart investment choice is, let's be a part of that. But the dying industries say, no, we should be using government funds as life support for ourselves. Apparently, a lot of investors agree with them, that is the investment professionals who are assessing risk and saying, yeah, let's invest in people who aren't going to be sued out of existence, because the accountancy, PwC, expects ESG-related assets under management to grow to $33.9 trillion by 2026, or about 1/5 of the worldwide asset management total. ESG, lamented Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, who we mentioned earlier in the show, Republican of Kentucky, by the way, is gaining ground on Wall Street. And that's just quoted as if that by itself was a terrible thing. Usually stuff that gains ground on Wall Street is the stuff Republicans want to jump on the bandwagon with. Wall Street likes it. We want Wall Street to give us their money. Let's agree with Wall Street. In this case, somehow it's let's disagree with most of Wall Street and go with the recommendations of the people who disagree with Wall Street but want us to force the money into their hands regardless. And Republicans, Milbank continues, are determined to stop the free market no matter how much it costs. A study by the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, and Trump knows something about them, and a Fed economist, for example, calculated that an anti-ESG law in Texas will cost the state $303 million to $532 million in additional interest annually. The Kansas Public Employees Retirement System said anti-ESG legislation there could cause more than $1 billion in losses from early sale of assets and reduce returns by $3.6 billion over a decade. Public pension systems in Arkansas said an anti-ESG bill there would cause them to lose at least $37 million per year. So by no means just Oklahoma, and other states that are considering similar measures are already calculating how much they expect to lose in public monies and public pension monies in order to placate the idiot politicians who want to score some presumably cheap and easy anti-woke points, except they cost billions and billions of dollars. In the end, the GOP's anti-capitalist binge is about culture, not economics, and you can see that coming a mile away, but why don't we give you 2 minutes to contemplate it and then tell you it in case you haven't seen it.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Wow, all right, I'm dragging this article out a little longer than it really needs to be, but I am kind of astonished by this. Oh, look, and there's the story about Prigozhin popping up in the way of everything here again, but no, nothing new here. Just making sure that wasn't like some new development we had to update you on. Where were we? Oh, yes, right. In the end, the GOP's anti-capitalist binge is not about culture, or is about culture and not economics. Representative Glenn Grothman, Republican of Wisconsin. I'm unfamiliar with Glenn Grothman, but let's see. Maybe because he's super dumb and I pay more attention to either, well, I guess smart people, or when it comes to Republicans, the most extremely dumbest ones. And those top spots are generally occupied by the same folks. But let's see what's happening in the lower ranks. Glenn Grothman expressed his concern that ESG considerations would work against, quote, certain disfavored groups in our society. Those disfavored groups, well, people don't like men. One of the biggest disfavored groups in our society, men. They're always getting the short end of the stick, don't you think? And, of course, people don't like people of European background. Also a big problem in America. White men have it real tough in America. That's what Glenn Grothman has to say, and so I think you know where he's coming from. And, maybe even if he were to grow a mustache, what sort of mustache would it be? Or if he were to decide, what accompanies, what really accents my suit nicely is an armband, I should wear it, talking about. All right, so it's European Men of European descent who really have it tough here in the United States, says Glenn Grothman. ESG investors, he argued, are the type of people who judge people by where their great-great-grandparents came from. And we know that that's a terrible thing to do. Other Republicans on the panel used their time to denounce the perceived woke wrongs of notorious liberal organizations like J.P. Morgan Chase, Nike, Anheuser-Busch, and others. Frerichs, a Democrat, pointed out the absurdity of me, that would be Frerichs, defending the free market against a Republican legislature trying to have a planned economy mandating what businesses have to invest in. That is weird, isn't it? Horseshoe theory coming to fruition once again. But the irony was lost on Comer, as is most stuff, who tried to draw a link between his anti-capitalist crusade and his simultaneous attempt to prove wrongdoing by President Biden and his family, which ordinarily you would think could have nothing to do with this, but it's one of the hottest topics on the right. They just love it and can't get enough of it. And if the other idiots haven't been able to prove something, Hunter Biden, kickbacks, Ukraine, corruption, blah, 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 then I will step in. I'll be the one to save us and prove that this really happened. But we already found out from Greg at the top of the show that that didn't happen either, because he doesn't have any evidence of this having happened because it didn't happen. So what are you going to do? The irony was lost on Comer, who tried to draw a link between his anti-capitalist crusade and simultaneously attempt to prove wrongdoing by President Biden and his family. Why, we just had a press conference and showed bank records that showed the Biden family getting millions of dollars from places like China, he said. I wonder what types of ESG policies China has. He actually said that, and I can't believe that he even tried to tie the two of these things together, but I guess they must have general instructions that just say Biden family corruption wherever you go, and if you can't tie it together, make something up. So they get their money from China, which really all by itself would be a bad thing if it were true that they were getting loads of money from China or Chinese interests. Presumably that would be awful in the Republican mind. But just to make it even worse, not only are they getting their money from Chinese people, the Chinese people are woke. So, doubly bad. I mean, they're really trying to do that here. That's crazy. China, of course, doesn't have ESG standards, Mr. Chairman, reminds Dana Milbank. It's an authoritarian country with a state-run economy. That's why you don't like it, right? We have to stop them from getting their money from places like China. Why? Because China is an authoritarian country with a state-run economy. Well, but aren't we trying to become more authoritarian and have the state run more of our economy? Yes, but ours is awesome and theirs is Chinese. You don't seem to understand the gimmitarian mindset. Our free market economy, which lets investors make choices free of the heavy hand of government, or at least they used to, is vastly superior. That's what we like to think about ourselves. And I remember, says Dana Milbank, when Republicans used to think so too. When he isn't laying waste to the capitalist system as a whole, Comer has been trying his all to take down a particular subset of capitalists, those with the surname Biden. The chief hunter in the House, Comer had for weeks been hyping his investigation into business dealings by Hunter Biden and numerous other Bidens, suggesting that he finally had the goods on the big guy himself, President Biden. Joe Biden's going to have a lot of explaining to do, Comer teased on his Fox News appearance on April 11th, promising a blockbuster news conference within 2 weeks, because that's the time period that Donald Trump usually uses when he's going to make something up. Very soon, very short period of time, 2 weeks. And Comer just couldn't come up with another number to go in front of the word weeks. He claimed in his subpoenas of bank records had uncovered influence peddling at high levels. A week later, despite the fact that he said it would take him 2 weeks. He claimed to have evidence that 10 or 12 Biden family members were involved in taking money from our adversaries around the world, and that these adversaries were getting something in return from Joe Biden. On April 23rd, he told Fox News that he would very soon, you might say, have a news conference, a major news conference, at which he would detail the influence peddling scheme that he now claimed involved at least 12 Bidens, tossing out the words launder, deceive the IRS, and foreign agent. He said multiple Bidens should be indicted, and he teased that the president himself might be, quote, compromised. So a little bit of everything here in his promises. Then on Tuesday, Comer told Fox News that tomorrow, that would have been last Wednesday, is going to be the judgment day for the Biden administration, the Biden White House. Like QAnon, almost. In a weird way. I can't believe they're so closely related in their operations. And so, after a month of hype, Comer and other Oversight Committee Republicans walked into the House television studio on Wednesday and revealed a whole lot of nothing. He had not presented any evidence of wrongdoing by the president. He hadn't presented evidence that the elder Biden, the big guy, had any involvement in his son Hunter's businesses. Comer's months of digging through bank records had found more than $10 million in payments from companies run by foreign nationals that went to Biden family members and business associates and their companies, but Comer produced no evidence that these payments were illegal or that any official government actions were taken in exchange. What he showed is that, I guess, several people with the surname Biden did work with companies that do business internationally, I guess, is really all that they came up with. The only thing he had to offer was more innuendo. It would be hard for me to believe that there was no official quid pro quo, he said, and we believe that the president has been involved. Said Comer, we're going to continue to look. That's not much. After unwrapping his nothing burger, Comer gave the first question to a friendly reporter from the Murdoch New York Post, but even he sounded skeptical. Comer gave the second question to the Epoch Times, a far-right publication that traffics in conspiracy theories, so they would be very interested in this. The reviews, even from the right, were savage. I'm not impressed with James Comer's Biden bombshell, tweeted former Trump advisor Sebastian Gorka. Wow. Geraldo Rivera said Comer and colleagues were, quote, struggling to find direct evidence of criminal conduct or corruption. He said the investigators need to put up or shut up. Well, I would imagine they'll do neither. And I don't imagine that anything happens if they don't do either one. Geraldo Rivera does nothing, so that's going nowhere. Let's see. On Fox and Friends, Comer got a dressing down from host Steve Doocy. The charge of influence peddling is just your suggestion, he told Comer on Thursday morning. You don't actually have any facts to that point. You've got some circumstantial evidence. And the other thing is, there's no evidence that Joe Biden did anything illegally. Comer had nothing. Make no mistake, Joe Biden was involved, he promised. Just take his word for it. On the other side of the Capitol, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, another avid hunter, offered this explanation for the latest failure to produce evidence of wrongdoing. People that commit criminal acts try not to leave a paper trail. So the lack of anything incriminating merely proves that the Bidens were very good criminals. You have to infer these things, Johnson told Fox Business. You're not necessarily going to get necessarily hard proof. He says necessarily twice in that sentence. Yes. Of course, if Comer is going to infer guilt based on the $10 million in foreign funds received by Biden family members and business associates over 15 years, he would also have to infer that Trump family members who have received hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign payments since his election are even more guilty by orders of magnitude. Alternatively, we can all infer that Comer is not very good at this and that Biden hasn't done anything wrong, or, most likely, both. Grand juries aren't generally known for their comic timing, but you got to give some credit to the one that just indicted Representative George Santos. I don't know if this is a sort of a conglomerate article of 5 different pieces that sort of kind of fit together. That's interesting, of course. The jurors sitting in Central Islip, New York, returned their indictment of the Long Island Republican on Tuesday, charging Santos with, among other things, fraudulent application for and receipt of unemployment benefits. The very next day, House Republicans began debate on the House floor of H.R. 1163, the Protecting Taxpayers and Victims of Unemployment Fraud Act. One of the 35 co-sponsors of the bill, George Anthony DeVolder Santos. The Protecting the Taxpayers and Victims of Unemployment Fraud Act takes much-needed overdue action to recover fraudulently paid COVID benefits and prosecute the criminals responsible, proclaimed the irony-challenged Representative Jason Smith, a Republican of Missouri and chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. If House Republicans really wanted to take a stand against unemployment fraud, they could expel Santos, who's accused of defrauding taxpayers of almost $25,000 in unemployment benefits during the pandemic, while he still earned a salary of approximately $120,000. But they need his vote, so I guess that's that. Outside the courthouse, after his arraignment on Wednesday, Santos thanked House Republican leadership for standing by him. I appreciate leadership for being so patient, he said, telling reporters, I have to go back and vote tomorrow, and that he did. The House passed the unemployment fraud bill Thursday afternoon on a mostly party-line vote, and among the aye votes was Santos. There are 3 weeks left to go now until this, I guess, new subject here, because it's got a big letter at the start, but there's just a couple paragraphs. Why not finish the roundup? 3 weeks left to go until the United States defaults on its debt. Let's check in now on where Republican leaders stand. The solution to this problem lies with 2 people, the President of the United States and the Speaker of the House, said Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell in the White House driveway on May 9th. That would really come down to Chuck Schumer and the President. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in the White House driveway had to say, however, 2 minutes later. Well, you might as well do it, that is to say, default, now, says former President Donald Trump on May 10th. So I guess he's encouraging it. No one even knows who's negotiating on the part of Republicans. McConnell wants nothing to do with it and says it's up to McCarthy. McCarthy says it's not even me. Chuck Schumer has to fix this. And that makes no sense whatsoever. And neither did this conglomeration of subjects, by the way. But I guess I didn't realize that Dana Milbank was just free to write, 5 partial columns and glue them all together like that. There was a little bit of transition, I thought, from, the Comer part of it wasn't even really a transition. That was just him actually trying to glue 2 unrelated piece of crap subjects together for no particular reason other than he's been charged with coming up with something to say about both. So he pretended that they were actually related to one another. Well, anyway, interesting and weird. Speaking as we had earlier of Ron DeSantis, we can add this piece that I picked up from the New Republic over the weekend. Just another one of the horrible side effects of being governed, so to speak, by Ron DeSantis. And who are we reading here? Tori Otten for the New Republic, whose headline reads, "It's now legal in Florida for doctors to deny health care to anyone if they feel like it." Because that's what you expect from doctors in America. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a dangerous bill, no way, that would give virtually any healthcare provider, including insurance companies, the right to deny care. And I think probably they're the more likely to be denying people care. But I'm sure it also has a conscience clause for doctors who can say, I don't believe in XYZ or whatever it is you're looking to get from me. I won't provide it to you. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill Thursday that will allow doctors and health insurance companies to deny care to anyone they want. Under the new law, a healthcare provider or health payer has the right to opt out of participation in or payment for any healthcare service on the basis of a conscience based objection, meaning based on their moral, ethical, or religious beliefs. Providers and insurance will face no consequences under the measure and will not be required to refer patients to a place that would provide the needed care. If they are penalized for denying care or coverage, the doctor or company can sue. So if you pay for insurance that says, I will have coverage for my oncology care, and they get the money and they cash the check, and the insurance company and or the doctor say, we don't actually want to, say, provide you with chemotherapy. That's very expensive. We would rather keep the money that you paid us as a hedge against the need for chemotherapy, which is very expensive, and not give it to you. And if we say, God told me not to cure your cancer, that would be enough, and you're not allowed to sue me for the money. I can, in fact, sue you to make you drop your suit for trying to get your money back for the care you paid for. The law makes no mention of protections against gender or race-based discrimination, leading opponents to rightly worry that the sweeping nature of the text will let providers deny care or coverage to women, people of color, and LGBTQ people. A doctor could deny care, for instance, if they are, quote, morally opposed to gender-affirming care, or if they don't like that a patient is having premarital sex, for that matter. And it's not just doctors. Under the law, insurance companies, nurses, pharmacists, hospitals, ambulances, and more could all also deny care. And here I think the major danger really is about, say, I would guess, transgender support care, things like that. Certainly abortion, probably all in the minds of the people who drafted this thing. But really, the language is overbroad and super gimmitarian. And basically the idea here, it could absolutely lend itself to that application. I don't care what it is you think you are entitled to coverage for. I now morally object to that stuff, and you can't get your money back. That's the upshot of a bill written this way. This bill is a broad license for healthcare providers and insurance companies to refuse services to people. No one should be denied access to medical care, said Brandon Wolf, press secretary for Equality Florida. And they don't even really have to be the spokespeople for this. Really, honestly, Consumer Reports could be making the same complaint, and they probably should be. This puts patients in harm's way, is antithetical to the job of healthcare providers, and puts the most vulnerable Floridians in danger. Kara Gross, the legislative director and senior policy counsel for the ACLU of Florida, had previously warned that the bill left too much room for subjectivity in determining criteria for care. There is no definition of moral or ethical in the bill. Who determines what constitutes a sincerely held moral or ethical belief? And more importantly, why should access to health care be denied based on such vague, imprecise, and subjective terms? She said in a statement. The law is one of the latest moves in Florida Republicans' unrelenting attacks on people's rights and access to health care. They have taken particular aim at women and LGBTQ people. Just last week, the legislature passed a bill that would let the state take transgender minors away from their families if they are receiving gender-affirming care. DeSantis, who also signed a law banning abortion at 6 weeks before many people even know they're pregnant, that will decimate abortion access throughout the South. So, I will say, it's all the super unpopular things that are supposed to make it very difficult for you, say, to advance in your next election. But I guess it still leaves you a bit able to terrorize legislators in Florida into doing your bidding, despite the fact that there's no real reason to believe that this can go on forever. Okay, let's see. Other things that happened over the weekend. Of course, there was the horrific idea of having the CNN town hall with Vermin Supreme and or Donald Trump, and they went ahead and did it. And the world was astonished to see that within about a 24-hour period, E Jean Carroll prevails in her defamation and sexual battery tort lawsuit against Trump, and he's held liable to the tune of $5 million, and within 24 hours, he is committing the same offenses on national television again, saying pretty much exactly the same things that landed him in court the first time on the defamation charges. Will E Jean Carroll consider suing Trump again? Or will she prefer not to go through it all again? Or, I don't know. I mean, it sort of depends on whether or not, we'll see what kind of advice she gets. Is it an open and shut case? Is it just another free $5 million? Or is it, as was suggested in a discussion about the case over the weekend, yeah, she certainly has him in terms of the defamation happening, but what are her damages? She, had already been tarred with his disparaging remarks, but has just been compensated for them. And now these 24-hour, now 48-hour or more old remarks, one, they haven't had much chance to sink in, I guess, nationally, because so many people skipped the CNN town hall. But, it would be difficult to calculate or point to actual damage being done. The story is out there. The result of the story is out there. Donald Trump is not telling the truth about the things that he's saying about her. They are disparaging, but what are your damages? I don't know. Although her team did an interesting and admirable job in calculating out damages and trying to show how much, they had some testimony about how much it would cost to conduct a national advertising campaign to combat the damage that had been done to her reputation, and came up with this figure of, 2 point whatever it is million dollars. I think it was like 2.7 of the 5 million plus verdict was to pay the costs of the necessary advertising. I don't know whether they're going to do the advertising. That's up to her, but it was an interesting calculation to try to make. And, I guess by the same token, you could say, although it would be difficult to put a dollar value to it, you might be able to at least argue, if she agreed to go back to court, that, in her, what was supposed to be her moment of triumph here in proving that Donald Trump really was wrong about this stuff, lying about this stuff, and therefore liable for this stuff, then he went and did the same thing in front of the biggest national audience he thought he could find on CNN's platform to do it, and he ought to be, and clearly there was nothing about the damages that was a barrier to him committing the same offense again, and at least we ought to should have gotten more in punitive damages the first time, and maybe we can collect them the second time. I don't know. We'll see whether she's up for the suit. But also, at the very least, it should be discussed. I mean, it won't be because they're immoral actors there in the CNN boardroom. But honestly, they should be reevaluating their choices in life and in general, and certainly in business, to say, what we ended up being was a free platform for Donald Trump to commit the same offense that supposedly cost him $5 million just 24 hours before. And maybe that's not the business we want to be in. And really, honestly, CNN should be considered as a target for Jean Carroll's next suit if she goes that direction. Who are we reading here? Oh, this is a collective effort by the Guardian's staff. E. Jean Carroll considering suing Trump for his remarks during CNN town hall. Let's sneak a little bit of this in and then depart for the day. The disparaging comments came just a day after the ex-president was found liable for sexually abusing the writer. Writer E. Jean Carroll is considering suing Donald Trump for defamation again after the former U.S. president made disparaging comments about her during a televised CNN town hall. Thanks a lot, CNN. Just a day after he was found liable in a civil case for sexually assaulting her. Everything's on the table, obviously, and we have to give serious consideration to it. Carroll's lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, told the New York Times about the prospect of a defamation lawsuit. We have to weigh the various pros and cons, and we'll come to a decision in the next day or so, probably, which would be now. So we'll see whether they have done anything about that or whether they want to make any announcements. On Tuesday, a New York jury, of course, ruled that Trump had sexually abused the advice columnist in an upmarket New York department store changing room 27 years ago. It also awarded about $5 million in compensatory and punitive damages, about $2 million on the sexual abuse count, and close to $3 million for the defamation for branding her a liar. Trump on Thursday appealed the jury's decision. Of course, that would just open it up. I wonder if it opens up the liability question again in terms of the damages at the appeals stage, and whether they could increase things and say, obviously showed no remorse for it and showed more than willingness to an actual interest in, and he went out and did it all over again. Maybe those punitive damages needed to come in at something like, I don't know, $1 billion. I don't think they would go that far, but clearly if you're looking for some sort of deterrent effect, it's going to cost a lot more, and it may never work, but that's fine. We can keep opening up the question of compensation over and over again and just keep upping the awards. Anyway, during that CNN Wednesday night event in New Hampshire, which attracted widespread condemnation of the U.S. broadcaster, CNN, Trump repeatedly insulted and demeaned Carroll and her experiences. Trump said her account of a sexual assault was fake and a made-up story, and referred to it as, because he's 100,000 years old, hanky-panky. Carroll told the Times that the remarks had been upsetting when she read a transcript of them. It's just stupid. It's just disgusting, vile, foul. It wounds people, she told the newspaper. And she added, I am upset on behalf of young men in America. They cannot listen to this balderdash, there's another 100-year-old word, and his old-timey view of women. Well, everybody's a little old-timey in this, which is a caveman view. And an orange caveman that can't walk 25 feet without pausing. So, not a particularly successful caveman at that. All right, time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and I bet he's done some homework in organizing his show. As a matter of fact, he's given me some tips about what he's working on here. Let's see. All right. First of all, of course, I guess James Comer. I lost my key witness and I can't get up. On the rest of his menu for today, a Tennessee company is refusing a National Highway Traffic Safety Administration demand to recall 67 million potentially dangerous airbag inflators. What would you need those for?
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
He's jumping in on the Ohio problem here. It's happening everywhere. Of course, GOP state lawmakers are trying to restrict ballot initiatives in an attempt to thwart abortion protections. And also later on the show, the Biden administration's proposal would let conservationists lease public lands, much as drillers and ranchers do, I guess in order not to drill on it. Very clever. Next.